Okay, most people think downsizing will simplify their life, and in many cases it does. For many, it quietly does the opposite, though. And here's what's happening and why it matters to you. Downsizing is usually treated like a practical decision. You're going to have less space, you're going to have less upkeep, less stress of all that responsibility. But what often gets missed is that it's not just about your house. It's about the life inside that house. And when that part isn't thought through, people end up trading space for regret. And in this video, I'm going to take you through the biggest mistakes made when people downsize that no one talks about, and how to make sure, if you're thinking about downsizing, that move supports the life instead of restricting it. These aren't hypotheticals. These are patterns that show up again and again with people going through this transition, and real decisions with real consequences, both good and bad. So here's the part that surprises most people. When you downsize, you don't just lose space, which is the obvious thing. You can lose function. The dining room table that no longer fits the family, a guest room that disappears. Maybe it's lack of storage that turns into a daily frustration for you. And sometimes a home that no longer supports the life you actually live. And that's the part no one really talks about. And that's the part I'm going to talk about with you today. Downsizing used to feel simple. Sell the big house, move into something smaller, and free up time and money. But what's changed is how we actually use our homes. They've become gathering spaces, storage for decades of life, and a reflection of our identity and routine. When all of that gets compressed into a smaller space without a plan, things don't just shrink, they really stop working for you. And this is where most people get confused. They focus on what they're gaining, which is less cleaning, lower costs, more freedom. And those are all very true. And those benefits are real for sure. But what doesn't get talked about enough, I think, is the emotional weight of letting go. And there's also the practical side, getting new furniture that fits that smaller space, or storage solutions for that smaller space, reworking how rooms are going to function for you on a day-to-day basis. It adds up quickly, both financially and mentally. And if the space doesn't match your lifestyle, that simpler life you thought you were gaining can really start to feel restrictive instead of freeing. This tends to affect people the most who have lived in their homes for a really long time, because it's not just a move, it's a shift in how you live, especially if your home has always been the place where people gather, where families come together, where really memories are creative. If your next home can't support those moments, you don't just lose space, you lose those experiences. So the question isn't, how do I downsize? I think the better question is, what does my next life actually need? Start with your non-negotiables. What does your home absolutely need to support? Is it hosting, hobbies, quiet space? Maybe it's family visits from family from out of town, or special occasions. Then think about function, not just the size of the room. It's not about the square footage. It's about whether the space actually works for how you live. It's also important to do a reality test for your decision. Can this home handle your real everyday life, not just the ideal version of it? And timing matters more than most people think. Waiting too long can create pressure. I've seen this with couples I've helped downsize. They took a year to make up their mind, and the opposite of moving too quickly can create that regret. And the right move is usually somewhere in between those two. So if you're starting the decluttering process, begin small. One drawer, one room, one decision at a time. I've done a couple of videos on how to declutter. Decluttering after 50, what no one talks about, but you really need to know, and decluttering your home faster, how to get rid of your stuff. So those two videos might help you with that process. And this builds momentum when you start small, and it makes the process feel manageable instead of overwhelming. You also need to expect that this will be emotional. There will be moments of uncertainty, really hesitation and even regret. And that's not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's simply part of the process. And another mistake people make is trying to do it all alone. This is a big transition, and having support can make a significant difference in how it feels and how smoothly it actually goes for you. And finally, being very intentional about what you bring with you. This is trying to fit too much life into too little space. What creates the downsizing trap? And I found this with our very own downsizing, bringing too much to too little space. Downsizing can absolutely work for sure. For many people, it creates more freedom, more clarity, and a better quality of life. It certainly has for my husband and I, but only when the space fits the life you actually want to live, not the version that sounds good on paper. Hi, I'm Deirdre Dunn, and this next video you may find helpful.